what happens when you take the Cthulhu mythos and you shove Sherlock Holmes into it? Well, let's take a look at that in today's game review. Hi everybody, my name is Justin and welcome to Game On. Today we are going to take a look at Bureau of Investigation, which is a game based off of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. It is published by Space Cowboys and written by Gregory Pravat. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, sir. And I have it on my game shelf technically filed in with the rest of the Sherlock Holmes games. I guess I could, in theory, file it with the Cthulhu games I have on the top row of my bookshelf, but I digress. We're going to discuss why I like this game, parts of it I don't like, and we're going to start off by giving it a comparison to the Sherlock Holmes games version of Consulting Detective, which I have all of, and if you have played those games, you'll understand the nomenclature I'll use. If you haven't played those games, don't worry. This will be easy. You can get into this game without having played any of the Consulting Detective games. Okay, so the big similarity between the two is, well, Bureau of Investigation is technically a Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective game. It just doesn't have Sherlock Holmes in it because it is based in Lovecraftian Massachusetts. It is 1920s. You are in both Boston, Massachusetts and Arkham, Massachusetts, and you work for the Bureau of Investigation instead of working for and with Sherlock Holmes in 1890s Victorian London. It is a very interesting setting because I love Lovecraft's setting in Massachusetts. Arkham is one of my favorite fictional cities out there. It is ripe with really cool mythos and lore, and this game actually kind of makes you feel like you're in Arkham, Massachusetts, and that's really neat. Okay, so one of the big similarities is that you are given a case booklet, just like in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, where it will explain to you the case that has to be solved. So you're given a booklet, which is really cool. It has some really neat artwork in it. You read the opening paragraph out loud to everybody because this is a cooperative game, and you can also play it by yourself, but it's more fun with friends in my opinion. And then once you're given the clues, which comes from the paragraph, the newspaper, the Boston directory, really tasked on you to figure out where to go next. And they are both similar in the sense that once you have read the intro, it is up to you to figure out where to go using certain turns. Now in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you basically have an unlimited amount of turns. If you do more than 8, you've pretty much lost. It's really hard to beat Sherlock in that version with taking more than like 8 or 10 turns. He's already beat you. But in Bureau of Investigation, you have a certain limit of turns that the Bureau of Investigation, like your handler, your chief, has given you. Might be 15 turns from 15 hours or 15 days. It doesn't matter how long the chunks of time are, you just have to pay attention to the number that they give you. One of the biggest differences, though, is that in Sherlock Holmes, once you have figured out a location you wish to go to, you can go straight to that location and you can read out loud where you have gone, and then you can take the clues that you got from there, writing down notes, yada yada yada. It's very fun. I love it to death. In Bureau of Investigation, they sort of try to add depth to the game by giving you a choice of going to a certain location and having an interview there, or investigating the area. So the case booklet is split up between investigation and interview, though in Sherlock Holmes, it's basically all smushed together, and I'll be talking more about this in the section of the video where I talk about the things that I don't necessarily like about the game. One quick note I do wish to make before we continue is that in the Sherlock Holmes games, when I play those with my friends, it's always funny to go, you know what it was? It was Aliens. Because it is a game that is grounded in reality, and it's fun to make the joke that, oh my gosh, the missing person is probably abducted by aliens, just because that's just the funny meme to make when you're playing that game. Except in Bureau Investigation, that might actually be an answer. And that's where it can get a little bit confusing, because you're no longer grounded in reality in this game. You're now in Lovecraftian's universe, and that can actually make it a little bit harder, because no longer are you trying to find the poison that could, scramble somebody's brain and give them amnesia. It could be a poison, or it could be an alien creature that's out there. And it kind of gives a little bit more red herrings that you can follow down the trails with. And it does add a little bit more of a sci-fi horror punch to the game. Alright, so what do I really like about this game? I really like that it is a game set in the Lovecraftian universe where you get to play as investigators and go through the case booklet turn by turn, trying to figure out what the heck is actually going on. I really like what the writers have done, trying to make you feel like you're part of a dark, gloomy Lovecraftian universe. I really like that, especially in case 1, it was like really pressing on you that it's dark, it's rainy, it's like it's film noir. There's always somebody watching you. Look over your back. Be paranoid. I like that. I like that because that's what I feel like a Lovecraftian investigator should feel like. I also, compared to the Sherlock Holmes games, really like the fact that you actually intervene as opposed to just answering questions at the end. See, in Sherlock Holmes, once you get to the end and you think you figured out the case, you just answer a couple of questions and then read the answer, and, the merry men go and arrest the perps. Whereas in Bureau Investigation, you can actually directly intervene in the case as your answer. You can choose to go to one of a few locations that is in the back of the book, where you can kind of play out how you, as a Bureau of Investigation investigator, actually stops the case, or at least solves it. So it's more active in the answer than it is just sitting back and answering questions while Sherlock Holmes lectures you about how stupid you are, because that's what he does in the original games. I mean, come on. Final thing that I really liked about this game is that at the end, it gives you books and short stories that Lovecraft has written saying, this is based off of this, or you notice that this monster was in here. Here is the stories that this monster is from, in case you want to learn more about them. I think that's really cool. If you've never played or really read any of the Lovecraftian universe, none of his other games, or games based off of him, this is really cool because it gives you a reason to go and look into the Lovecraft literature. Okay, so now's the point where we talk about what I didn't really like about the game. And the biggest thing is that this game feels unfinished. I paid $45 for this game at my favorite local game store. It cost $5 more than the standard Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective games, though I feel like I got $10 less information and material in the game. In Consulting Detective, you have all these newspapers, double-sided, really great, beautiful artwork. And in this game, you get a couple one-sided newspapers, and the artwork there is some pretty nice artwork in it, but it just doesn't feel as nice as the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective games. Those ones feel, like they were finished with high class. And not to say that this one's bad, it just feels like it didn't have enough time to add more to it. And, saying that feels to the outsider looking in like, oh, you're complaining about newspapers not being double-sided? A big reason people play this game is because we like the red herrings that come from the many, many news articles and ads and blurbs that are in these newspapers. I can go down so many rabbit holes and be so wrong with the amount of stuff that the Sherlock Holmes versions of these games gives me, whereas in this game, I'm looking at the newspaper, and I don't want to give it too much away, but let's just say that there's not a lot of red herring fluff in there. If you see it in the newspaper, it's probably important to the case, and it's not going to lead you astray. And that is kind of, sad, because part of this game is going down, false leads and realizing just how silly you were doing that. Whereas in Bureau of Investigation, you don't get that as much. Another big thing that I'm getting a sticking point on is that you can either interview or you can investigate an area. And to be honest, unless you really know that you need to investigate a specific area and there's like no one going to be there, the interview seems like always the better option. You're always going to get an answer, no matter how you go about doing it. But Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective wraps it all into one, whereas this wraps it into two. It like breaks it apart, but it seems silly to break it apart. It's trying to give you depth on the options that you can make, but seeing as interviewing seems to be the better answer usually in general, breaking it up is just, it doesn't feel right. Like, might as well just interview every time, because that's how I'm going to get the better answer. So it's just adding extra fluff to the game. It feels like it's just trying to pad out the book. I'm sorry, Greg. As the writer, it's still a great game. It feels like that was... You could have used that money on that ink on adding more red herrings in the newspapers, in my opinion. Bureau Investigation is a fun game. I don't want to smash it into the ground and make you think that I dislike it. I personally give it a 7 out of 10. Board Game Geek gives it a 7.9 out of 10, and I will tell you that once you go deeper down into the cases, they do get a little bit more interesting. I'm not going to show you any of them, because they're actually sealed off from the rest of the game, so they have like their own seal, like, do not open until you are ready for this, which is really, really cool. I really like that idea. It's one of those for your eyes only kinds of games. Feels really good as being an investigator for the Bureau of Investigation, but I think the game Mythos Tales, published by 8th Summit Games, does a better job of being Bureau of Investigation than Bureau of Investigation is. It is obviously heavily influenced by the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective games, though it doesn't bear its namesake anywhere on the box. Though people on Board Game Geek and the forums say it's basically that game. It is much prettier game, it's full color, it gives you a lot of cool newspapers, a lot of red herrings to go through, and it's like the Sherlock Holmes games, except it actually feels a little bit more tight and focused, and it just feels like a more fun and more atmospheric game overall. Plus you get 8 cases in that game as opposed to 6 in Bureau of Investigation. I think it's out of print now. I bought that game, Mythos Tales, for $10 at a bookstore, so I got very lucky. But in the comments below, I want to know what you guys think about these kinds of games. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know if you like board game reviews like this, what else you want to see. My name is Justin, and as always, game on.